Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to FMA Discussion, episode 527. And today we have PG Marc on, and we will be covering Tudo. But if you are interested and you want to get the episode where PG Marc talks about his whole back on FMA, going all the way back to the Silent Academy, et cetera, I would recommend you check out episode 163, which was a very long time ago. I can't remember when we were back in the hundreds since we're on 527 now. But if you're watching, tell us where you're watching from and smash that like button. And without further ado, here he is, Tudo.
Plus episodes. That's pretty impressive, Dean.
Yeah, it's so funny people say that, and it's like it hasn't hit me. It's kind of there, but I bet you when the day I stop doing this, it'll probably hit me then. I'll look back and I'm like, wow, I did like 500 and something episodes, but now it's just kind of because I think I'm still in the in the game of it.
Yeah, but it's important. You do many things, but just speaking to this only. It's important work for the networking of the Filipino arts. There's always a little bit of, crab mentality or, whatever. But
what's that?
Crab mentality? You don't know that term?
I'm just kidding. I know.
Oh, you were being facetious. I see. Okay.
Yeah, never experienced.
But at the same time, the Filipino arts, there's always been this interaction, and you've been doing tremendous work helping facilitate that. People who don't get spotlight, their chance to come to broader attention and so forth. It's important work you're doing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that's the thing too. That's those have been the one, like giving people a platform or a voice that perhaps under normal circumstances would never get that opportunity, right? You know what I mean? And and trying to get the females, that's always been a difficult avenue, but we tried and we still try. Okay. So Kali Tudo, what was the initial inspiration for you to kind of come up with this material?
The Filipino arts have always said that the movements of the empty hands are like the movements of the weapons. And so there was a big, occasionally heated thread. It got really big, hundreds of posts and, many, many words, where this group was saying, well, where's the trapping? And so they were challenging the teachings of Guru Nasano. And, a lot of the people, it was Guru Nasano's forum, says people were there and a lot of them were trying to defend it and not doing a very good job. And somebody said, hey, Marc, this is going on. You should go over there and see what's happening. So I went over there and I did. And it seemed to me that a lot of the attempted defenses were like, well, I poke them in the eyes, I punch them in the groin, that kind of stuff, really, didn't answer the fundamental question. And so it seemed to me that the question this group was asking, which is, we're looking in I could be wrong, but I say this is about 97. So the UFC had been around for a number of years. But, was still in its early days. And, the question they were asking, where is it? It seemed to me a fair question. And so I got to thinking about it, and it occurred to me two basic reasons. One was at that point in time, a large percentage of the Filipino martial art community really didn't test itself adrenally. It's better now, but for a lot of it, that's still true. And if you haven't tested it in the adrenal state, you're not going to do it for the first time when real-time adrenal state presents itself. You will default to what you have tested adrenally the most. So it could be boxing, Muay Thai, any of the grappling arts, whatever. That's what you will default to. And the other part of the answer, it seemed to me, was that at that point in time, very few people were consistently doing double stick and dog brothers. It was all, overwhelmingly single stick. Whereas as I was coming out, I had a very serious knee injury in '92, and so as I was coming, I had 3 ligaments snapped, and blah 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 blah. And so as I was coming out of it in late '94, early '95, is when I decided to start going double stick. Is my preferred emphasis, and the reason that my starting point there was that gave me 4 times as many triangles. I was saying to myself, we've been hearing about all these triangles. Why aren't we seeing them? It tended to be leaning in, leaning out, what we might call an elastico kind of game, but there weren't really many triangles to be seen. And so I could only think of one triangle. As I was a righty fighting in a right lead, at that time, my understanding was I needed to have the weapon in the front hand, so I could only do triangles that started right and finished right. But if I had a stick in each hand, I could start right, finish right, start right, finish left, start left, finish left, start left, finish right. I had 4 times as many triangles. And as I began exploring that, as I was returning from my knee surgeries, things began revealing themselves to me. And so then, come the late '90s, where this occasionally heated thread, was going on Gurren Asano's forum. It seemed to me that people who had not tested, that if you're even if you had adrenal experience that was single stick, it really wasn't going to come out in empty hand, which is 2 weapons of equal length. And so I have a background, I did my best fighting as a single stick fighter. And so, I retired from active dog brothers fighting at 48, and that's when I moved over to the Raw Gym, which was Rico Chiparilli, Frank Trigg, and Vladimir Matushenko. And Rico invited me over there. That started with a backroom interaction over at Higgins' place. And Rico was a world-class athlete, and I'm most certainly not. And for those who don't know, Rico, 2-time world wrestling champion, protege of Dan Gable, off the charts excellence. And so the thing that set up it was just doing hand games. And so I started doing some of this stuff as part of my hand games. And so Rico knows how not to plaster somebody who's his inferior, and he was intrigued by what I was doing. And so he invited me to come over to the Raw Gym. And I just got my brown belt from Higgins. And so I had a pretty good foundation in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but my interest was more in the fighting than the sport Jiu-Jitsu of the Machado variation. And so it was over there that I began exploring what was to become Kali Tudo. And so, the guys there, it's a gym full of, high-level world-class pros and, serious amateurs and so forth, and I was already 50. So clearly they could have plastered me, but in the way of serious athletes, serious fighters, there was nothing to prove against me. And so, we would just have lively play. And, people were intrigued by what I was doing. And so when I did the first Kali Tudo DVD, Rico himself had nice words for it. Frank Trigg had nice words for it. He actually contributed the Southpaw versus Righty material that you find therein, which piece of trivia, he showed his lefty versus righty game to me, which became the material we call trigonometry in the Kali Tudo. And I shared that with the young Leota Machida, who used it. It is all Trig 101 and Trig 102 footwork. Leota's very, very, very talented fighter. And so, the material began developing there. And was also in this era that I met Chris Gizzi at the Yard down in Hermosa Beach. And, Chris was, I walked in. Yard is a small gym, but it's kind of gym where pro athletes go and, some high-level training being done there. I met Howie Long there, and I walked in. You see Chris, you recognize that this is from another species of human. At the time, he was 6 foot, 245 pounds with 29-inch thighs. And, so I'm training in the back room, and Troll brings him back, and, he goes, "Marc knows Kung Fu." And, he introduced me to Chris. And so there was this game that Troll set up where both, the idea was one guy would be like this, and the other guy would try and knock his hand. First, he tried me, and he moved me, but not that much. And then it was my turn, and I sort of gave him a misdirective attention. And I definitely moved his hands. And then I did an Indian arm wrestling game with him where I was able to unbalance him, and we became friends. And so so he helped me a lot. Tremendous athlete, and so he liked the footwork that I was working with because he said it reminded him of what he was doing as an NFL linebacker. The going in different directions, covering the run this way, covering the run this way, going up to support the line, going back and covering a receiver with the upper body turning, and so forth. So it's a very 360-degree footwork. And so there's somewhere I have some nice words from him saying, that he liked my footwork because it reminded him of what he was doing. And so, he helped me and I helped him, and, we had 2 wonderful years together. And so you see him there in the Kali Tudo 1, and he was in the photo shoot I did for the black belt cover piece. And so these things started coming together, and I started playing with it. But because I had the adrenal experience of double stick, I had the many years of, quality training with, Guru Asano. And then, there are little moments where you have a moment of satori. There was, sometimes when, I was the body on which I had introduced him to the Machados. And so after his lesson with Hagen or Roger was over, we would go over to my house, and Poonam Guregor would come down. And, he would teach Guru. And then after that, Guru would leave, and I would get my private with Poonam Guregor. And so because there was, like Guru Asano, it's like you're rolling with God, but there was a comfort there because we had the rapport that came from my being his, training partner for his lessons with Higgin and with Roger. And so we would sometimes play. At that point, I was a bachelor, and so I had mats over the living room and blue background video over the window, very much, martial art bachelor kind of a place. And, so I'm there and I'm doing guard on him, and he starts doing some Jun Fan and Kali type trapping against my guard game. And I went, son of a gun, I never thought of that.
Oh, okay.
And so, that was a real. So if you look at the structure of how I proceed with the Kali Tudo DVDs, the first one is about introducing triangular footwork. But I didn't want to stretch because I'm going to 2 audiences, the MMA audience and the Kali audience. And so I organized it focusing more on the triangular footwork, which for people of the Muay Thai, MMA kind of footwork, and that's kind of fresh. And then the second one is I'm showing trapping against the guard. Because one of the things with trapping is when you go to trap somebody in the Jun Fan kind of a way, people just move. They do. But if the person he's on his back and the ground is behind him, you can catch up to him. He can't really go anywhere. So that was the starting insight there. And then it was not until the third one where I had Kenny Johnson as the guest instructor. Kenny's the wrestling coach to Black House, to BJ Penn, world-class guy. I'd met him over at the Higgins place on Artesia Boulevard and so forth. And so there's a progression there in the logic of things. It wasn't until Kali Tudo 4 that I started showing weaponry movements, and just for reasons of teaching coherence, I chose prison sewing machine. Is to say, here's a weaponry movement that we can use. And so, it just gradually developed. I've been working on it since, I'm going to say around 2000. So that puts me at 25 years I've been working on it. But, obviously I'm more geriatric now than I used to be. But my son Conrad was taking jujitsu lessons. He's getting ready for a tournament. He's tall and skinny, so he's having troubles, achieving his sprawl, and because they were shooting in and under and so forth. And Pedro Munoz was there, and at that time he didn't really have much English. Obviously Portuguese, but he also spoke Spanish, and so he and I were, my Spanish is, I'm pretty comfortable. And so, we established rapport, and so he was giving lessons to Conrad. And I said to him, here's what I've been working over at the Raw Gym. What do you think of this? And he said, that's interesting. And so he and I began working together. So in the bid lessons of the association, you can see about 2 hours of, with his permission, you can see about 2 hours of me working with him and sharing the Kali Tudo with him. At that point in his professional development, he was with the Resurrection Fighting Alliance, I think it was called. And so he was rising up through the ranks there, and he achieved champion. And then that's when he got the call from the UFC. And then that's when Black House invited him to come over to Black House. And so he said to me, he says, Mark, I love what we've been doing, but like I'm getting to work with, what's his name, Rafael Cordera, something like that. Anyway, big MMA coach. And if I come in with, this stuff, which is so different, they're going to feel like, well, why are you here? You're right. So he liked the material, but he wasn't able to continue with it. And I've got a variety of stories of that sort where, it's like I'm on the edge of, Pete Juska, Smiling Dog. He won the amateur Chicago heavyweight. Now, what he did is he came out, this guy like this, he went like this, and he went into the Dracula like this, and the guy was like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
And so he, up here, well, I'm about to do an elevation drop and shoot. And so he did, and he came teeth first into Pete's shin kick and, got knocked out cold on the spot. It was kind of scary for a little bit. It turned out to be fine. Yay. We don't want anybody lastingly hurt.
Oh, yeah,
but, just the movement caused him to do something unsound. And so, which actually brings up a point, which is in DBMA, I evolved my understanding of range due to my experience. Most people think of Largo, Mavio, and Corto, but in DBMA we have 7 ranges. And so, the first range is at start out calling it snake range, which has nothing to do with the snake disarm. My joke is Filipino martial arts, consistent use of terminology is prohibited. And it has to do with the way that Eric had a very, think of like a snake like this, and the way that Eric moved his stick in the outer range before contact. Just to have a name for it, I put the name snake stick, say 4 per series, the snaky stick. This, so what Eric had that was different than everybody else is most people, when they move the stick and they want to impress, they're striking or they're blocking, and that's it. But Eric has the movements in between that, which is kind of how we fight. And so there, I think an unappreciated piece of what makes his movement distinctive is that he played lacrosse. So for anyone who's seen lacrosse, you've got the stick and the basket at the end, and they do these movements like this, throw and catch the ball in very tricky, deceptive ways. And it's got plenty of contact. It's like light football pads and so forth. And Eric was defensive end for Columbia University football as well. So he, unlike most Filipino martial art practitioners, was really comfortable with contact. And he had this but the deceptive movement. And so it took to calling it snake range, and then after fooling around with the terminology a bit, the next range was weapon range, which is where his bubble and my bubble collide, where the weapons hit each other. If we have small knives, not very important. If we have staffs, really important. If we have sticks, we can make it important because we know how to take advantage of it. And so then we have Largo, Mavio, Corto, clinch. And I was the one Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to dog brother fight, and of course ground. And so a lot of people, as I was starting to articulate this theory, were having trouble understanding how could it be a range nobody's hitting anybody. And as I was talking to Ramiro Escalilla, Grandmaster Ramiro Escalilla of Cabarro and Eskrima, which is a different system. It's a system for villagers fighting and the bandits who are coming to steal the crop. And they fears, they throw the spear like a sword, and something, they got shield, there's double spear, so like throwing weapons is part of the game there, and then going to backup weapons. So it's my it's not a one versus one fight. It's various versus various kind of a fight. And so when I should try and articulate what I was going to say, it's something very perceptive, the psychological range.
Hey, PG Marc.
And so it's in that pre-contact moment that we establish, we look. Say again?
They're saying it's choppy. Guys, am I choppy or?
Did you say?
Yeah, they're saying it's we're choppy, but I'm just trying to think if I'm coming across choppy or are you. So I'm just waiting to hear from the audience what they're saying. But one person is saying that we're coming across choppy, but I mean, you seem like you're fine now, so maybe it was just something.
All right, what would you like? Should I keep going or should I wait?
Because right now, I mean, I'm not seeing it. I mean, right now you're coming in clear as day. So, Cratchy's face is.
Okay, well then maybe it's just that one person's there.
Yeah, they're saying Mark's.
Right, so anyway, so he.
Okay.
Should I talk or should I wait?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So he said, yes, the psychological range. And that kind of reminded me of, like, think of why Bruce Lee he was a righty and he fought with the right side forward so as to dominate the moment of contact. And in weaponry fighting, that's even more important. And so this dominating the moment of contact, which is, and we in DBMA, we establish that through our snake range, our psychological range movement. And so because of my double stick experience, which allows you to be much more deceptive in that range and much harder to read than single stick, where it tends to be like, okay, who's faster, stronger, and so forth. But you can be more tricky and deceptive than crafty with two weapons than one. That informs one of the core understandings of Kali Tudo. So here, if I may.
Sure.
Let me see here. So if I were working with double stick, so DBMA people will recognize this as RB scenario. So Eric, with double stick, he had what we call the double clock. Pununguru had what he called the U and the V. He also had the pluma. But with the double clock, I'm here like this, but now, only by moving forward, now both sticks are going up, aren't they? Mm-hmm. Only by moving forward, both sticks are going down. Now one is going down, one is going up. Now they're both going down. Same thing on this side. Now they're both going down. Uppercut, horizontal, diagonal. So here would be straight blast, uppercut, horizontal, diagonal. Same thing on this side. And then you start being able to fluidly transition between the two sides. So that when you go to empty hand, you have, and this is movement for nitrous burst. I'm not, there's two ways of playing this. One, I can be like Joe Denny, and then suddenly I change my idiom of movement and knock them to, hopefully, presumably knock them back to the beginning of his OODA loop. And I'm working with the Boydian principle of change in height, speed, and direction. Or I can be playing full-on freak the whole time. This is what we call full-on freaks. I can be here like this and these different things. And then I have my movements of nitrous burst.
Okay.
And with this, and because I'm playing the four triangles that I learned with double stick, at the moment of impact, I tend to have more success in creating angular impact. Whereas if I'm doing Muay Thai, that has less angular impact than Silat typically requires. So the Kali or the Kali requires. And so the Kali Silat can be harder to find if you're trying to initiate with a typical striking game in Muay Thai or boxing. Boxing, or all the related punches, they're all, putting it in tennis terms, they're all forehands. They can go straight, they can go curved, but they're all forehands. But when we start moving like this, we've got all kinds of angles and different things, and these movements allow for different points of impact. And so boxing is, the speed of combination in boxing is limited to the speed of weight shift. Every punch requires a shift of weight. Mike Tyson, prime example of extraordinary ability to shift weight, his combinations with power and combination, that was off the charts compared to anybody else. But if I can put 2 strikes out with 1 shift of body weight in that moment, as far as my opponent is concerned, I've doubled my speed. I'm not moving any faster, but he has to deal with twice as many things coming in. And so if I know what I'm looking at and I know how to read structures, and this is something we cultivate with our stick fighting and some other things, and then there's the particulars of empty hand. This is where we look to establish a moment of an advantage. And so the basic fight strategy of Kali Tudo is this. What do we do when we have advantage? We take advantage. He is the turd, we are the smell. Wherever he goes, there we are. By so doing, we step through the portal to the magical dimension where martial arts and crafts actually work. And so instead of like, oh, I kicked him in the leg, let's move around some more. Oh, I punched him in the nose, now let's move around some more. In the moment that I shift into Kali Tudo, is I'm looking to create an advantage that I can take, of which I can take advantage. This is key point. And so this is a modality that is a nitrous burst. And so, just for reasons of, fight cardio, I can't just be I can't be blitzing along the whole time. I need to choose well and wisely my moments of burst. And if it ain't working, I need to break off before I shoot my load. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, especially when you get old. Yeah, 100%.
So these are some of the ideas. So in addition, so there's the fist, but there's also very much striking with an open hand, either straight. So this is an idea I picked up. Nathan Featherstone, Irish guy. He shared an old Irish bare knuckle boxing manual, and one of the things they showed was hitting with this surface, that you rotate more this way. And so, the ultimate purpose of Kali Tudo, certainly we play with it and experiment with it in the laboratory of MMA, and we think it can add to an MMA fighter's success, chances of success. But the ultimate criteria, the only criterion, is the test of the street. And so we don't, so if we have ways that we can fearlessly hit the skull without breaking our hand, boom, if the kind of slap that I can bring as a stick fighter, we're here like this, I jam that forearm and I clear it a bit, boom, that coming down on the skull, I can be fearless with that, and I think I can deliver something pretty formidable.
Yeah. And especially that clearing mechanism.
And so, and guess what? My hand is available to do, my fingers are available to do things that the human hand can do, whereas if I hit like this, I now have to shift before I can do things with my grip, which I think a very significant point. But, Bruce Lee spoke of line familiarization. So one of the things we can generate here is line unfamiliarization. Most people are not. He's in this structure for a moment as I jam like this, and kind of a lopsided energy here like this, or stick fighting, what we would call a dodger. The backhand horizontal to the head. This goes to the story of Goro Masano's, we call the dodger, basically swinging like a base. If I jam and clear that very strong movement, the skull is there. And I'm not getting near the teeth. I'm not getting near the blood and the saliva and all the cooties that they can contain that I don't want to be near in a street fight.
Yeah, for sure.
Also, because the footwork is bilateral, I should be, as we train it, I should be completely indifferent as to whether I'm left lead or right lead, and as to whether he is left lead or right lead.
Or right lead.
So there's strategies of righty versus righty, boxer, righty versus righty. And think of a guy like Lomachenko. He's a lefty. And his movement is very much based around defeating righties. He does it really well. But if he faces another lefty, it's not as successful. There was a fight of Lyoto Machida, who was a lefty, and one of his later fights down in Brazil, and the guy was also a lefty. And because I knew Lyoto and from our time together at the Raw Gym, and when I ran into him years later at Black House, he says to me, "Oh yes, you, the guy with the Akita," and I had such a fanboy moment. Lyoto Machida remembered me. But I was watching, as a lefty, he was using, this footwork and, some other things, this and that, starting point, the material from Frank Trigger that I shared with him. But when the other guy was a righty as well, this stuff is about getting outside the front foot.
Yeah.
Which MMA has evolved. So if you've got somebody who's got stomping kicks with the front leg, there's additional questions presented. So think of like Bones Jones, the ways he stomps at the front knee. That material may be dated, as far as, if you run into somebody with that particular skill. But when the other guy was right lead, he wasn't getting outside the front foot. So for a while in that fight, he tried going to left lead and going here, but it just wasn't familiar enough to him. And so he had to go back to right lead, and it was a tougher fight for him. And so, so we want to have complete bilateralism of footwork. So I can go right lead against right lead. I can go right lead against left lead. I can go left lead against left lead. I can go left lead against right lead. And so now this gives me the ability to move in and out of different structures, different games. And in the moment you think about, you're familiar with OODA loop theory?
Yeah.
So, one of the things OODA loop says is, in the moment that you change what you're doing, you're looking to put him back to the beginning of his OODA loop. Yeah. He has to assess, observe and assess all over again what you're doing. So if he's assessing my movement like this, related knees and kicks, and then all of a sudden I start coming in like this, that's a reset for him. And so, so if I can, so as we shift footworks and if we shift idioms of movement, we can choose and we can take control of the fight. He might be better than me at 8 out of 10 things, but if I can impose my 2, then things should go pretty well for me.
Yeah, for sure. We got a couple questions.
So I've been talking a lot.
Yeah, we got a couple questions. One question is, have you ever heard or seen the hidden draw form in the Bondo system?
Not by name. I mean, great respect for the skills of Dr. G. And,
okay.
By the way, his, one of his principles from the kukri is a major ingredient of the DBMA chupacabra system, which is one of the things that he says with the kukri is that the live hand never goes in front of the blade. Mm-hmm. And I've taken that, and it's part of the chupacabra system. The idea is you don't want to cut yourself. And there's an awful lot of really good Filipino Kali that does that. And, but as far as the criteria of the chupacabra system, we look to avoid that. We're looking for consistency across categories, so if you're used to doing this, you want to, whether it's a gun or a knife, you don't want this hand in front of it. If there's any knife, if there's any kind of a crash, I'm doing a gun thing. Oh, he crashed. Whoops, I slashed my wrist. In terms of the, high adrenal condition Browns, the reality of, flashing steel, that's the way, chupacabra organizes it. And so that, that comes from Dr. G and Bondo. And piece of trivia. Those of you who've read my piece, How I Met King Abdullah of Jordan and Came to Ride His Motorcycle, there's a part in there where I get this mysterious email, and it makes reference to the person. The email is like my employer. He mentions that he too has trained with Dr. G. So so actually, somewhere on we have the footage of King Abdullah training in one of Dr. G's classes with the Kukri. King Abdullah is a real soldier. He was Jordanian Special Forces for like 20 years before his dad decided that he was going to be king instead of his uncle. And so anyway, just mentioning Dr. G. I'm sorry. Keep going.
Yeah, no. It was a Bondo reference. So, okay, another question, and this is from Glenn. You know Glenn, huh?
Yeah, woof woof.
Yeah. Okay, so he sent a few questions in, but a couple you kind of already answered indirectly. So do you when you watch MMA fights, do you watch to see if there's any simulation or association in MMA fights as far as Kali Tudo tactics or techniques?
Well, MMA evolves, and so I thought that the fight where T.J. Dillashaw took the championship, I forget the Brazilian guy's name, but he was like undefeated for 8 years and, just mega badass. Mm. And in that particular fight, his footwork was very much the footwork that we teach in Dos Tricas. I mean, so it was, very triangular lead changes and so forth. Now, of course, it was all with the straight, with the forehand and thrust strike, whereas we have the additional variables. But, I thought that one of the guys from Stockton, what were the names? The brothers? Diaz brothers.
Oh, the Diaz, yeah.
The Diaz brothers, he was using something very much like a Dracula, but, by our criteria, he should have had the other arm up in the Dracula. So if you're standing, for example, the Diaz brothers, some badass boys, full respect, but defending the front leg was not a forte with them. I mean, so he was fighting like this, and and the kind of striking that he had, but it was like this, which presents issues of here, whereas we do it like this. So this side is further back, and the footwork takes us in the other direction.
Right.
But so there was that. Anderson Silva, who is came up training alongside Inisano, my friend and fellow Inisano tribe man, Willie Laureano. And so Willie Laureano introduced him to Gurren Asano, and there's footage of Anderson training with Gurren Asano with Tsuyoshi Abe being the training partner. So if you watch what Anderson does, now a lot of this may be just intuitive to him, being the great fighter and athlete that he is, or it may be the Kali influence. I don't know. I don't claim. But when he starts doing his hand jive that people can't keep track of, that would be an example of what in DBMA we would call snake movement. And so, there's hints of it. And the MMA game is becoming much more bilateral in its footwork. But I would love to get my hands on somebody and share what I have, and I think I could really take somebody and give their game a whole bunch something more. So if you are out there, whoever you may be, get in touch with me.
Yes, yeah. Here's another question, and then I got one more from Glenn. Which group in LA primarily trains in the Kali Tudo material?
I'm sorry, you faded for a moment there. Which group?
So this is a question from Maynard. He's asking which group in Los Angeles primarily trains in the Kali Tudo material.
Okay, well, the NoHo clan, Poppy Dog, who trained with me for many years, they're more focused on the real contact stick fighting. Francisco Taruk, who's got a group out of Cerritos.
Who's that?
Francisco has some very good time with me with the Kali Tudo material.
Never heard of him.
And there's a story the two of us training one day. So I would show him stuff, and then we would do a lively spar, friendly but lively. And the rule was he had to play what we called Joe Generic, which is he had to be the typical Kali Tudo, the typical MMA idiom of movement.
Okay.
And one time I forgot to specify that. And so he started doing the Kali Tudo on me, and I went, "Whoa, wait a minute, what was that?" And he says, "Well, you didn't tell me I couldn't do the Kali Tudo."
Oh, you didn't give me the precursor.
So, it was a funny moment. So, funny moment. Proud moment. So he's got some good understanding there. Nathan Carlin, Grow Faithful Dog up in Chatham. He's got a school there. He's got some good work. John Vaverka, hunting dog. Nathan is Guru DBMA. John Vaverka's black tag, one step short of Guru and DBMA. John's got a lot of good time with me. Ashley Sage, I forget her ranking, but she's candidate dog brother. She had a drunk hit her car and some broken thigh bone, and so she's been working on coming back from that. But she'll make full dog brother and so forth. She also has some very good time with that. Wicked bitch, Kathleen. I don't want to mispronounce her last name. Something Polish. She went on to become a defensive tactics instructor for California Highway Patrol and then for LAPD. She's got some good time with the Kali Tudo. Sherilyn Latar, I'm forgetting her. Was it the cat who walks? Or I forget. I'm sorry. Apologies, Sherilyn. I'm forgetting her dog brother name. But she. I'm not her primary source, but she's been exposed to some good material there. So I would say Francisco and Nathan and John Vaverka and anybody in that orbit would be places to go in the LA area.
Okay, so Maynard.
Oh my God! I can't believe. Hold on, big gap. Like I'm going very Biden-esque in my old age. Food dog Marc Odell out in Moreno Valley. And Fudo's got a lot of years with me. He would make that horrendous drive in from Moreno Valley, quite regularly for at least 10 years. So, he's got plenty of Kali Tudo training.
All right. So there's some resources there for Maynard, who also lives in the LA area. Okay, next question from...
Where does Maynard, I'm sorry, where does Maynard live?
He lives in the Los Angeles area.
Okay.
All right, we got who's this guy next?
Yes, from those various options,
yeah, he'll find somebody. All right, next question from Glenn. All right, how do you suggest introducing Kali Tudo into drills? For instance, like Hubid, mitts, or sparring. How do you suggest introducing it?
It depends on the person in front of you. Is this somebody who is coming with a, a lot of the people who are interested in this, they're going to have the basics of Muay Thai or, sort of at least blue belt level MMA or, something like that. And so for somebody with that background, they have a lot of adrenal or quasi-adrenal training of four-handed thrusts, and they find it very hard to break out of that. And so one of the things would be, I would say, so for example, learn to throw a ball with your complementary hand. So, we don't say good hand, bad hand, strong hand, weak hand. We say dominant and complementary. So as a righty, my complementary hand is my left. And so if I can throw a ball left-handed, that's going to bring out my body mechanics. Back in the 80s, when I trained with Paul Vunak for about 3 years, he said, put a shot put in your hand and learn to generate that power chain that way. A lot of people, as they learn Hubud, if they're righty, they do it right-handed. which is, even within the logic of Kali, how much sense does that make? For example, watch this. I need to have, whether it's with, with hammer grip or with ice pick grip, it seems to me that the preferred side to which to learn Huba to begin with is the one that's going to give me the reps of developing the primal power chain of the complementary side in the dominant function. Notice the terminology. The complementary side in the dominant function. So Huba is great for that. And so out of Hubud, you can start now finding, so for example, somewhere it's one of the vid lessons, the association, I think it's available on YouTube as well. I have Splinter Dog Anton Haley, who's now defensive tactics for San Fran PD, of me. So basically we're doing bilateral Hubud and so forth. And then, so like here, here comes his right, and so here, so as I clear like this, now it comes, here's my figure 8, and then I can punch, him in the diaphragm. So when, so I'm here. So look, there's my clearing motion, and boom, there's my, probably hammer fist, boom, and I come back with this. So, or this could be a slap, it could be a hammer fist. Sometimes, you can just go with like a phoenix eye fist, this one knuckle looking to cut right at the corner of the eye, here like this. And so when this one comes back, often they're not there. But even if he puts up, in this case, his left hand to block, that's going to give me this. And now, oh my goodness, there's all the fun trapping sequences. But the more I have truly bilateral footwork, if I'm limited to what we call short stepping, if I'm in right lead and I throw a right jab, I'm stepping with the right foot. That's short stepping. But in order to drive on somebody, I need to be much more natural. I need to do it going forwards and backwards. I need to be able to drive and know, okay, now there's how I put it on them. But one of the things that is part of this is that the arms are a target. It's not that I'm going to make him say, ow, and give up because I hit him in the arm, right. But it is going to be a bridge to get to him. And this goes to the 7 range theory, where we have the part that we call the triangle from the 3rd dimension. Eric has reference to this in the first series. Now, he's doing it stationary, but he's showing hitting the stick, hitting the hand, hitting the head. This is the triangle. This is the distance between the opponents. And so we need to be able to hit the stick, hit the hand, hit the head. So there I've taken Lameko combination 5, jab, fronda, slash, and I'm hitting the stick, I'm hitting the hand, I'm hitting the head, but because I have bilateral footwork, I can get across that triangle from the 3rd dimension. So similarly, if I have somebody here like this, I use the hand as a bridge to get across. And John Fon, it could be a Poxow or whatnot, but I find more success with hitting it. Small story in which I look good, but indulge me in a moment of shamelessness, if you will. When I was at the Raw Gym, Chris Gizzy came up there with me, and they dug having him there. They recognized the level of athlete that he was, and so Chris was sometimes working with his NFL buddies, helping them get ready. At that point, he was a coach for the Nike Combine, and so one day there's this guy there. He's like 6'9" and 6'7", 6'9", 290 pounds, and he's getting ready for defensive line for the San Diego Chargers, I think it was. And so Marc calls me over and introduces me, and he goes, "Marc knows Kung Fu." And so, in a very friendly way, starts doing some, sort of slap boxing kind of thing with me. Obviously, he plastered me, but it was all very friendly. And so, in one of those moments, he'll take with me to my grave, literally take with me to my grave. His hands out like this, he's just kind of messing with me is my footwork was I did the triangle. And so from the inside, I cleared this and stepped into the Dracula. See, he sees that elbow coming at his face, and he doesn't see the bolo punch coming up, which I gently placed on his chin. And so that was a very cool moment for me. He says, "That was really good. I've never seen that before. Let's do some more." So the rest of it didn't go as well for me, but I did have that moment. But so, that would be an example of using the limb for getting across.
For getting bridging. Okay.
Yeah. So, that goes to, the ways we, in DBMA, that we, teach hitting the stick as a way of getting across. So, so for example, like in the Dos Tricas material, Tricas material teaches the triangles. It teaches integrating the stick and the feet. But as a starting point, I'd say about 2/3 of the material is for somebody who fights like this. And you could say, "Oh, that's simple. That's nothing." But if you have a guy who's a fighter, you better respect that. And if you can't handle a primal structure like that, then the higher levels, you're not ready for. You got to be able to handle that. And so, and this is something I show in the first Kali Tudo tape, if I can hit that stick, and now, so as I've hit that stick, I'm bridging, and now he's like, I now have 2 sticks and he has 1. He's going to throw this one. And so, I'm ready for it. Here's the 3rd one. So it kind of looks like we're going to have a Redondo 6. The difference being the hand is not coming from here, it's coming from here because this is a power block and not a half-beat hand hit. But basically, I now have 3 strikes to his 2. And one of the secrets of Kali Tudo is that rhythmically we're working in triplets, whereas most people, are in 4/4 rhythmically, for those who understand musical reference to musical time signatures. And so, these are some of the ways in which we take advantage.
Neat.
What was the next question?
I'm checking right now to see if I missed any. Okay, the next, let me just see here. So then, is it fair to say, this is from Glenn as well, so then obviously the Kali Tudo is not just for self-defense, but it can be.
Well, I would describe it this way. Kali Tudo, we test in an MMA-like laboratory, and that is where we adrenalize and test the functionality of the ideas. But its ultimate intention is for the street, for die less often, the interface of gun, knife, and empty hands. And so a lot of time, basically, and so now we're going into DBMA DLO theory. We organize with 3 categories of fight. There's the fight that starts at a striking distance. There's the fight which called monkey dance. Who are the guys waving hands and talking and escalating? We call that monkey dance. When I was teaching San Francisco PD, they thought, like back last fall, they thought that was an offensive term. It's not meant offensively in any way. It's just like, that's the level of human interaction there. And then the 3rd one is nose to nose. And, for me, that my understanding on that one crystallized with Pindakar Paul Batoir back in the late 80s at the Inasano Academy. So, Garnasano was training with him, and so there's a class he's teaching, and he's teaching in a very CLOT kind of a way, kind of secretive and this and that. And we're like, well, Garnasano's training with him, so I guess we better should, as well. And so we're seated there, and he says, I need a volunteer, Marc. And so I stand here, and he comes up, and he gets nose to nose in front of me, and there's, with a certain intensity and the aura, and he says, do something. And in that moment, I realized that all that I had so far in my training required me to take a step back first and set into some sort of a fighting stance. And in that moment, it was a moment of Satori. I understood Silat in a different way. So the material of the Kali Tudo is, it's very particularly effective for monkey dance because, so the positions that, the structures that we're learning in the Kali Tudo, they're very easy to mask in those monkey dance escalations. And so, you can, and there's ways of setting up the stance. Your first movement, you should really get a big jump on the guy. And what do we do when we have advantage? We take advantage. He is the turd. We are the smell. We step through the portal. Wherever he goes, there we are. By so doing, we step through the portal to the magical dimension where martial arts and crafts actually work. It's actually tougher to do if you have somebody who's already up and moving, which will be the laboratory of MMA type sparring. But, if you can't make it work in that context, there's more work to be done.
No. Awesome. Trying to think of any more. Let me just see if I miss. So what? Well, I got one. Okay. So what do you? All right. So you got. Sounds like 4 levels that you are status quo, as far as that you got, as far as work towards this. Are you taking it any further? Is there more?
What do you mean by 4 levels?
I thought you mentioned you had 4 series or something. Am I mistaken?
Well, there's range. The 7 ranges. Within the 7 ranges, there's the triangle from the 3rd dimension. There's bilateralism. All these pieces integrate.
Okay.
Is that what you were thinking of?
Yeah, I don't know where I got the 4 from, but anyway. So where are you still developing this, or where's your goal to, like, far as the future regarding this?
Oh, I'm always working things.
That's
I've got stuff here that one of the things. Here, let me shift gears.
Oh, here we go.
Kali
Tudo 1 through 4. That's where I got it from. The DVDs.
Okay. Yeah, the 4 DVD. Yeah,
Okay.
there's 4 DVDs out there.
Got it.
So, the first one is focused more on the triangular footwork. The second one is trapping against guard. And then the third one, it begins exploring the striking. And then the fourth one, it goes into the striking much more. But, so there, one of the things Gurn Asano said to me, he says, as you get older, Mark, you need to use your students to demonstrate more, which, is him gently telling me I'm slowing down and getting geriatric. So there, I had a Splinter Dog, Anton Haley, who was BJJ black belt, pro level MMA skills, national champion in tactical games. He's one of my mentors in firearms. And Guru Beowulf, Marc Houston, who at that time was 3-0 as a pro MMA fighter. He went on to other things, but pro MMA fighting is usually not a wise long-term decision.
Yeah.
So the two of them were interacting with each other, and I thought they did a really outstanding job. So if you were to look at what they were doing there, I would say that's a pretty good representation of, what the system can achieve. And, and then there are the nuances that, you can only get by training with me. Joining the DBMA Association, www.dogbrothers.com, $30 a month, $300 a year. There's the online classes for members of the association. There's coming to train with me. Where I live in North Carolina is about an hour drive from the Raleigh airport. And as I say, I would love to get my hands on somebody who's, looking to take their MMA game to a different, but, they already have other skills. I mean, I'm not the guy to, give you a Muay Thai game. I was a brown belt under Higa Machado. I'm far, far from that now. But, if you have that skill set, I can talk to it, but, I'm not the person to impart that skill set. But, I can show what I think is a really interesting and striking game that can be really decisive.
So, all right, from Maynard, where can we see sparring with Kali Tudo? Any video links?
Uh, well, the trick there, and it's a good question. And the challenge with cultivating this skill set is if you're doing it with somebody who doesn't know Kali Tudo, the part of the requirements of this idea is that you pull the trigger and you go nitrous, and you're going to be doing things that people are not ready for and that they can walk into, and really get you know uh, perhaps damaged, or they can get hit in a way that they would regard as a cheap shot, or dirty
Kind of,
fighting, and so there need.
yeah.
Yeah, you understand what I'm trying to say here?
No, it's kind of like Piper. Hey, I want to show you something. You know what I mean? It's kind of,
Yeah, yeah. That's a very good example. Piper goes nitrous,
yeah, yeah.
and so yeah, certainly Piper's influenced me. But this and that, with boom, and this and
Yeah,
that, and there's a lot of as you know well, there's a lot of C-lot influence in Piper, and
for
the
sure.
way the head, there's a lot of deceptive misdirect. So we're like, okay, like you didn't see that elbow coming, and it just smashed you in the eyeball. Well, that most people are going to regard that as an unfriendly thing to do in training.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so it's when I was a bit younger and I was still sparring this material, what I would do is I would say to somebody is, I have a very unusual game, and we both need to go with I'm not disrespecting you by doing this, and and the things need to be worked out. So at a certain point, if somebody says, "Well, that's not really sparring because you're not really trying to hit each other,"
Mm,
there needs to be now for people who understand fighting and understand what they're looking at. I say, look at what those guys are doing in Kali Tudo 4. And so you're seeing the Kali Tudo idea for that, establishing that moment of advantage, that moment of dominance from which other things can flow. It's not like we're doing only Kali Tudo. It's we're using it to create, we can continue with the Kali Tudo, or go to something else which we also know that works. That makes sense.
yeah, no. Absolutely. Again, let me see here. Okay, where can people get these DVDs? The ones you put.
Wonderful question. Dogbrothers.com. At
Brothers.com.
this point, it's downloads. The DVD technology seems to be on the way out, and so it's downloads. And so just go to
Everybody's
the
doing now.
website and go there. And I would also say join the DBMA Association. There's a lot of the vid lessons there. I think we must be approaching 2,000 vid lessons. A lot of them are the DVDs broken down into smaller pieces,
Wow.
but then there's just years and years of backyard stuff. And so, in the casual way, the economics of all of this is challenging. And but if with the criteria of a friendly backyard class kind of a situation. For example, I recently had a class with that I taught out at the dojo at 37, the gun range 37 PSR. And so the new owner of the range who took over from Frankie McRae, Dan Black, who's 6'3" and 230 and formidably strong and very, very functional Muay Thai skills, and Kenny Smith, who is a Marine in Syria. Those of you who've seen the picture of me with my shockwave with the bayonet on it, that flag in the background flew over the American embassy in Syria, and he's the man who brought it home. So he goes 260. So it's two big boys, and both of them have been in life and death situations, so they know how not to be an asshole. Just in exploring material, in a playful way. And so, that the big lesson of them working is I'm showing, okay, here we're working the shearing shots with the forearms, and and how we create angles with that. And when you dominate that moment of contact in a certain way and know how to keep going, as versus like, aha, I punched him in the nose, yay, let's do this some more. Things can end very abruptly. And so that presents a challenge for sparring. So then the other guy will start going like, I'm going to dance out here, and then you shoot your load, your nitrous load, and then now you're gassed. Like, oh, this Kali Tudo doesn't work. So, there are challenges in the sparring of this material, but, if you already understand something about fighting and you know how to, the image I like to use is we're both in a band. And, so like if you have one guy turning the volume knob up beyond the other guy, if you have one guy playing the beat faster than the other guy, the music is for shit. You need to back it off to where you're both at matched intensity. And, what does the Machado say? Leave your ego at the door. Because there's a lot of elbows in here. There's a lot of strikes with the forearms that people are not ready for. Pedro Munoz was starting to use the forearm strikes really well. And, so for someone who's not used to that, and you catch a forearm across, right here, and now he's got a cut, it's like, oh, you fucking asshole. So it's tricky material to, both guys need to know how to be calm in the sparring.
Sure. No. I've got another question. When will DBMA be a direct neutral link download?
I'm a boomer. That went over my head technologically speaking. Explain that to me.
I'm not. It's from Morgan. Morgan, maybe rephrase that just so we know what you mean. Okay, here's another question. Does Marc still teach Chupacabra? You still teach it?
Absolutely. So, the thing with Chupacabra, and this allows me, sort of drifting away from, the Kali Tudo here like this, is the business of martial arts has rapidly changed since I started. It used to be that, people would have to bring me in for a seminar, and, I was doing seminars all over the place. I have a passport where every inch of every page is covered with, the visa stamps of the seminars that I did in Europe and so forth. But more and more, the internet, people are used to just cruising around and, searching for stuff to pick up for free. And then you have all kinds of people, who are just looking for clicks. Admire me in one form or another. And, some people know, one of my interests is Jungian psychology, which I blend in with evolutionary psychology. Matt Larson's doing some phenomenal work in this regard. Highly recommend his Substack. Really deep, insightful stuff. Anyway, with the Greek mythology, there's the character of Achilles and the character of Odysseus. And most people aspire to be Achilles. Think of the Brad Pitt version in the movie Troy. And, that begins with he's banging these two, the big battle all day long. He's banging these two hot babes all night. They got to drag him out of the bed in the morning, and he's got to go, that giant over there, Boagrius. Like if you kill him, we won't have to have a battle. It'll just be a 1-for-1, settles it for everybody. And so he just runs at him and kills him, and then he goes up to all by himself, goes up to the other army, and he says, "Is there anyone else?" I forget what it is. The alpha character. Think of Mike Tyson in his prime. Think of Conor McGregor before he started losing. Top Dog himself was a different kind of an alpha. There's many ways of being the alpha, and But then in staying with the character of Achilles, basically he was a narcissistic asshole. He didn't care about the Greek cause. When he felt disrespected by King Agamemnon for taking his captured slave girl, he stopped fighting. And, the other Greeks are saying to him, Greeks are dying, because you're not leading us. He's like, well, Agamemnon's got to make things right with me. So for him, it was about the glory. Even in there's that moment where, the boy drags him out of bed to go fight Belagrius. And he says, I'd be scared to fight, and it's about glory, which is ultimately a very narcissistic thing. Whereas who won the war? Most people forget that the Iliad ends before the fall of Troy. The Iliad ends before the fall of Troy because the story of the Iliad, as is the opening verses of it say, I will tell you of the rage of Achilles. So it's about how that rage resolved. And in the movie, we see that with him coming to mutual respect with King Priam in the funeral games. Now, of course, because most people don't understand the real meaning of the story, the movie needed to go on to the fall of Troy and so forth. But in the Iliad, the fall of Troy is not included. Who won the Trojan War? Odysseus won the Trojan War with the stratagem of the Trojan horse. Yeah. Who was the second best fighter of the Greeks? No one knows. Now, I went and I got the Cliff notebooks, as I was, reviewing all of this stuff for myself. So if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't know this. But in point of fact, the number 2 fighter was Odysseus. And after Achilles fell, everybody wanted to have his armor that was made by I forget his name, Hephaestion or whatever, the god who had made his beautiful armor, blah, 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 blah. And it came down to him and Ajax, and who was shown as falling to Hector in the movie, but was not the case in the Iliad. And when Odysseus won, Hector felt so disrespected that he committed suicide. So these stories have levels and levels. And, Odysseus, we don't think of Odysseus for his fighting skill. He had the skill. But for him, it was about winning the war and getting home. And so, like in Dog Brothers, Eric was our Achilles. I aspire to be Odysseus. And so, for me, in the current environment, the trick is how do I teach without people stealing what I'm teaching?
That's, with today's internet, social media, that is difficult.
Yeah, so you're working, you're engaging with this, with your Western Piper material, and you and I have had conversation about how does one teach that kind of a knife system, in a way that is moral, because the system started out as a criminal system, and it's about anyway, blah blah blah, and so for me. Basically, you don't see me putting out there, like, look at this. I don't do a lot of look at me clips.
I don't either. I know. Yeah.
Yeah. And, and I've had experience with people flagrantly stealing things. Recently.
Borrowing, right?
No, I mean, it's like when if I teach something out there, okay, it's out there. And, I like to think that my dial us off the material, the dog catcher and so forth, I think over the years has proven to be of, big influence in the combatives community. Most people don't even realize that at this point. And that's fine. That's just the way of things. But if I have somebody to whom I personally taught it with care, not in passing, and then he says, oh, my system always had it, which I saw recently somebody do, that doesn't sit right. I'm a student of Guru Nasano, and I have, I do my best to follow his example of giving credit.
Absolutely.
But if people, like the more that people feel that they will be properly acknowledged and given credit for their contributions, the more giving people can be. But if, the more people, I remember, do you remember Tom Meadows?
Tom Meadows, no.
He was the whip fighter in tape 6 in the first series, and he was at one point the weak half heavyweight champion.
Okay.
And he was very highly ranked in the Dosi Para system. And I remember him saying to me one time, he says, "You know what the most uh, common system is in the Filipino martial arts?" And I said, "What, Tom?" He says, "That we have that two style."
Oh, that is. Oh my gosh, that is so
Yeah,
good.
yeah. And
Wait,
in
I'm gonna give
its
you
own way,
credit.
Apo Ramiro was also very good with that. I persuaded, I was very impressed and intrigued with what he was doing, and so I persuaded Gurnosano to come to a seminar that he was doing in Orange County. If I remember correctly, it was Ron Riegers who was the host,
Enriquez.
and
That's right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
yeah, and so you as a fellow, and I mean this in a very positive way, a fellow FMA nerd, he's, he Alpo Ramiro was saying it was a northern system. And girls saying, no, there's something else. There's some central in there too. And so as he's conversing with him, of course, he's a big name, and so big fuss was made over him being there, blah blah blah. And it turns out that there had been when they were in a prisoner of war camp during World War II in the central Philippines, that there had been exchange of techniques. And
Ah.
so just by observing the movement, Gurnosano could see, no, there's central in there too. And why am I telling this story? What was I saying a moment ago?
You're talking about borrowing, stealing.
Yeah, yeah. So when he taught at the first DBMA camp. I'm going to say this was like 2000, 2001. It was at the Raw Gym, and he had a way of saying, "Have you seen this before?"
Mm.
And if someone started the "we have that too" stuff, he says, "Oh well, then I have nothing to show you," and he would just turn on his heel and walk away.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Very very subtle, but he was a wonderful man. He recently passed, and
Yeah, he did. I know.
he had a very sly sense of humor. At one point, like I ran into him at the Inosanto Academy a few years ago, and it had been a few years since we'd seen each other. I'd been to his home a couple of times in Fresno. So I ran into him, and he pretended not to recognize me. So I thought, oh, he's gotten senile, and we didn't meet that many times. I shot some wonderful footage of him with which Nick Papadakis put to good use in the
Mm.
download that he put together of the Cabaroan material. And then he just sprung the trap on me. He had recognized me all along, and he had just fooled me with pretending to be senile. So he could be very playful. And interesting system. Mall Dog, Carlos Flores, who's teaching for us in Chicago, he was starting to play with Spear and Shield. And I said,
Oh, I just
that reminds
fascinated
me
that
of
from the Zulu.
Navarro stuff, the Compuesta subsystem. And so, so we had a period of exploration within the association there as he was, working his
Oh,
sparring
I
with
need to
that.
talk to him. See if there's any parallel to the Zulu.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so you have considerable experience with Lloyd, who is well familiar with the Zulu, the Nguni influence, and so forth. Um, yeah, so yeah, but he would say, oh, well, you've seen this, you have that too. Well, then I have nothing for you.
Yeah, I like that.
Like, if you weren't going to, because his system was distinctive.
Yeah.
It was distinctive. So you were going to pretend that you had that too. He's like, okay, I'm not, done with you.
I've heard
But
nothing but
just done so.
great things about him. I heard nothing but great things about him.
Yeah, wonderful man, wonderful man. Um, yeah, wonderful man. And so whenever his people have something that they want to put out there, they have green light to post on DBMA Facebook. Just like I do with Sonny Ampod's people.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just sold their home, and anybody from that, whenever they have anything, I'm glad to share whatever spotlight I have with them. Maestro Sonny was something special.
That's what I
There
hear.
was a many teachers under one roof weekend, and I think it was due. Yeah, well, there was a thing. It was in Dusseldorf, Germany, and it was one of these things like, we won't pay you, but we'll cover your costs. And I heard good things about him, intriguing things about him. And so I took the gig just mostly because I wanted to meet him. And
Yeah.
so,
Oh my God.
in a very relaxed, non-ego way, uh, we did a friendly sport knife duel, and he had me so utterly timed, without any acceleration, without any suddenness. He had this thing where he was getting in this low Sealotty kind of a stance, and for him, the knife was hammer grip. At that point in time, all my influence was kind of from my mid '80s Bunak era, just snap cuts and moving and different attributes. And so with this blade coming up at me this way, and he's down really low in this cross-legged stand. He was very much of an ectomorph. I had nothing, and then with his footwork, it was frickin' magic.
Yeah, I heard that was magical. His footwork.
Yeah. So he's something special. So Maj's Solderholm is a very good representative, and I don't know the other names, but
Jay
people
wow.
there. Yes. Yeah. So, and as right now, I'm working on coming out of my hip replacement. I had a hip replacement November 4th. So I'm re-strengthening the legs. My movement today probably reflected that more than a little, but as I come out of that, maybe I think some of that material that they've put out there would be good for me to take a look at. The footwork there is very special, and yeah, are you familiar with my download documentary, The Grandfather Speak #2?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I've seen Sunny, the whole clips on Sunny.
All right, for those who aren't, it's it can be found. And so basically, he was dying of lung cancer, and one of his people approached me, and I said, well, I wouldn't want to be the ghoul, pouncing on the dying master or whatnot. And he says, no, we would like to, be recorded. And so I went up there with Ron Gabriel, my editor at that time, who Filipino, screamador in his own right, editor extraordinaire, and all of his students performed for him for the last time, and the depth and the breadth and variety of what he had imparted, really, really amazing. And sort of in a moment of meaning for me, he had a picture of the two of us together from Germany on his wall. He had many things on his wall, but so he had remembered me from Germany, and so that felt good.
Yeah, I heard nothing
but
but
the movement.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. I mean, unbelievable. But I gotta get going because I gotta get the kid from work. But thank you for coming on. I hope folks got more clarity on your Kali Tudo, and I'm glad you were able to describe it to everybody. That was awesome.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the platform. So, for anybody who wants to pursue this or the other things at DBMA, dogbrothers.com.
Yeah. Anytime you want to come on or something you want to share, just let me know. Yeah.
Much appreciated, and gratitude for everything you do for the FMA community.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it.
So as we say around here, the adventure continues. Woof woof.
All right. Well, you take care, and thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Dean.
All right. Bye. And that wraps up. I actually forgot the number. 527. Yeah. Okay. Who's next? Want to get back on track with Marshall Meh next Wednesday. I think it's going to be me, Renee. Generalizations and GMs. Double G's. Yeah, that's basically what we're going to be covering. Generalizations and GMs. And maybe, you know what? I'm just make sure I'm missing. I missed a few comments. Sorry, Maynard. Just seeing this. Yes, same to you, Tim. You do. I don't know who this Nick guy is. Some Gonzalez, whatever. But anyway, yeah. So Wednesday, as far as FMA discussion, I'm not sure who's coming out, but as always, it'll be pinned and on the feature section and FMA discussion, so you will know as soon as I do. But thank you again for everybody that jumped in, commented, and if I don't talk to you or see you, Happy New Year.